In the gilded halls of Astoria Palace, where centuries of tradition clash with modern ambition, a single tiara holds the power to destroy a dynasty. When Princess Isabella defies protocol and claims her grandmother's most sacred crown jewel, she unknowingly triggers a chain of events that will expose long-buried secrets, ignite fierce rivalries, and force the royal family to confront a truth that could shatter the monarchy forever. What begins as an act of remembrance becomes a battle for the very soul of the crown, where loyalty is tested, alliances crumble, and the price of power may be higher than anyone imagined. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Astoria Palace as Princess Isabella Victoria Ashworth stood before the ornate mirror in her private chambers. Her reflection stared back, but today something felt different. Today marked the 3rd anniversary of Queen Margaret's passing, and the weight of expectation hung heavier than the silk gown draped across her shoulders. Isabella had always been the spare, never the heir. Her older brother Prince Alexander was destined for the throne, groomed from birth to carry the crown's burden. She had found peace in that arrangement, content to pursue her charitable work and maintain a relatively normal life within the confines of royal duty. But everything changed when Alexander abdicated last year, choosing love over crown when he married a divorced commoner against the family's wishes. Now, at 28, Isabella found herself thrust into a role she never wanted, never prepared for, and, frankly, never thought she deserved. The coronation was still months away, but the pressure had already begun to transform her from the carefree princess the public adored into someone more guarded, more calculating. Her lady-in-waiting, Margaret Thornfield, entered the room with practiced silence. Margaret had served the royal family for over 3 decades, witnessing the rise and fall of 3 monarchs. Her loyalty was absolute, but her discretion was legendary. "Your Royal Highness, the Queen Dowager requests your presence in the blue drawing room," Margaret announced, her voice carrying the weight of formality that palace protocol demanded. Isabella's stomach tightened. Queen Dowager Vivian, Alexander's mother and the late king's widow, had never warmed to Isabella. Their relationship was cordial in public, icy in private. Vivian had made no secret of her disappointment when Alexander abdicated, leaving the crown to pass to Isabella instead of remaining within the direct line. "Did she mention the purpose of this meeting?" Isabella asked, though she suspected she already knew. "The memorial service preparations, Your Highness." And Margaret hesitated, something she rarely did. She mentioned the crown jewels vault. Isabella's heart skipped. Queen Margaret's personal collection had remained untouched since her death, sealed away in the vault according to her specific instructions. The late queen had been Isabella's grandmother's sister, and, despite the complex family dynamics, she had shown Isabella more genuine affection than anyone else in the royal family. As Isabella made her way through the palace corridors, she passed portraits of her ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to follow her progress. The weight of their legacy pressed down upon her shoulders. Each monarch had faced their own challenges, their own moments of crisis. Now it was her turn. The blue drawing room was Vivian's preferred meeting space, decorated in rich navy and gold with furniture that had been crafted for King George III 2 centuries earlier. Vivian sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression unreadable. "Isabella," she said without preamble, gesturing to the chair across from her. "We need to discuss tomorrow's memorial service." Isabella took her seat, maintaining the composure her training had drilled into her since childhood. "Of course, Your Majesty. I've reviewed the order of service, and everything appears to be in order." "Everything except your choice of jewelry," Vivian said sharply. "I understand you've requested access to Margaret's private collection." The accusation hung in the air between them. Isabella had indeed submitted the request that morning, hoping to wear something of her gray tance as a tribute. Queen Margaret had been a fashion icon in her youth, and her jewelry collection was legendary. "I thought it would be appropriate to honor her memory by wearing something she cherished," Isabella replied carefully. Vivian's laugh was cold. "Appropriate? Child, you clearly don't understand the significance of what you're requesting. Margaret's collection isn't simply jewelry. It's a repository of royal history, much of it complicated." Isabella felt a flicker of irritation. Even now, months before her coronation, Vivian continued to treat her like an inexperienced child rather than the future queen. "I'm well aware of the collection's historical importance. That's precisely why I believe it would be meaningful." "The Astoria tiara," Vivian said suddenly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That's what you want, isn't it?" Isabella's breath caught. The Astoria tiara was Queen Margaret's most prized possession, a stunning creation of diamonds and sapphires that had been crafted specifically for her coronation 60 years earlier. It had never been worn by anyone else, not even during state occasions when protocol might have demanded it. The thought had occurred to me, Isabella admitted. Vivian stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. That tiara represents everything Margaret fought to protect during her reign. Wearing it isn't simply a matter of honoring her memory, Isabella. It's a statement of intent. What kind of statement? That you intend to rule as she did, with absolute authority, unwavering tradition, and complete disregard for those who might question your decisions. Vivian turned back to face her. Is that the kind of queen you intend to be? Isabella felt the challenge in those words, the implicit criticism of Queen Margaret's reign. Margaret had been beloved by the public, but within royal circles, her inflexibility and resistance to change had created tension. She had ruled during a time of social transformation, often finding herself at odds with a modernizing world. I intend to be the kind of queen our people need, Isabella replied, standing to match Vivian's height. And if that means honoring the woman who dedicated her life to this monarchy, then, yes, I'll wear her tiara with pride. Vivian's expression hardened. Very well. But understand this, Isabella. Some symbols carry more weight than others. Some choices cannot be undone. As Isabella left the blue drawing room, Vivian's warning echoed in her mind. But her resolve had only strengthened. For too long, she had allowed others to dictate her path, to minimize her role within the family. Tomorrow's memorial service would mark more than just a remembrance of Queen Margaret. It would be Isabella's declaration that she was ready to claim her place as the rightful heir to the throne. That evening, as the palace settled into its nighttime quiet, Isabella made her way to the crown jewels vault. The security was extensive, requiring multiple authorizations, and the presence of the keeper of the jewels, Sir Edmund Blackwood. Sir Edmund had served in his role for nearly 20 years, overseeing one of the world's most valuable collections. Your Royal Highness, he greeted her with a formal bow. I must say, this is highly irregular. The Queen Dowager specifically requested that Queen Margaret's collection remain sealed until after your coronation. Isabella felt her jaw tighten. Even in death, it seemed, the family dynamics continued to constrain her choices. Sir Edmund, as the heir apparent, I believe I have the authority to make this decision. Of course, Your Highness. I simply wanted to ensure you were aware of the sensitivities involved. The vault was a marvel of engineering, buried deep beneath the palace with walls lined in steel and concrete. Temperature and humidity were precisely controlled to preserve the precious metals and gems. As they descended into the depths, Isabella felt the weight of history pressing down upon her. Queen Margaret's collection occupied an entire wall, each piece displayed in its own climate-controlled case. But it was the central display that took Isabella's breath away. The Astoria tiara sat on a velvet cushion, its diamonds catching the vault's specialized lighting and throwing rainbows across the walls. It's magnificent, Isabella whispered. Indeed, Your Highness. Queen Margaret commissioned it from Gerard in 1964, specifically for her coronation. The central sapphire came from her own engagement ring, a gift from King Edward. She insisted on incorporating personal elements into the design. Isabella studied the tiara more closely. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with each diamond perfectly cut and set to maximize its brilliance. But it was the sapphire that drew her attention, a deep blue stone that seemed to hold secrets in its depths. She never allowed anyone else to wear it, Sir Edmund continued. Not even during state visits when protocol might have suggested sharing certain pieces with visiting royalty. She said it was too personal, too much a part of her identity. And now she's gone, Isabella said softly. What good does it do, sitting here in the dark? Sir Edmund remained silent, understanding the rhetorical nature of her question. Isabella reached out to touch the case, her fingers tracing the outline of the tiara through the glass. I'll wear it tomorrow, she decided, for the memorial service. Your Highness, perhaps you should discuss this with whom? Isabella interrupted. With the Queen Dowager, who's made it clear she doesn't believe I'm ready for this responsibility. With the Prime Minister, who sees me as a placeholder until someone more suitable comes along. With my brother, who abandoned his duty for personal happiness. The bitterness in her voice surprised even herself. For months, she had tried to maintain a facade of gracious acceptance, pretending that her sudden elevation to heir apparent was a role she embraced willingly. But, standing here, surrounded by centuries of royal heritage, the pretense finally cracked. "No, Sir Edmund. This decision is mine to make. Tomorrow, I wear Queen Margaret's tiara, and I take my first real step toward claiming the throne that fate has placed in my path." As they prepared to leave the vault, neither Isabella nor Sir Edmund noticed the small security camera in the corner, its red recording light blinking steadily. In a monitoring room 3 floors above, a figure watched the footage with interest, already reaching for a secure phone to place a call that would change everything. The memorial service was set to begin in 12 hours, but the real drama was just beginning. Isabella had made her choice, unaware that it would trigger a series of events that would test every assumption about loyalty, tradition, and the true cost of royal power. In her private chambers, Queen Dowager Vivian sat at her desk, composing a letter that would arrive at Buckingham Palace before dawn. The contents would ensure that Isabella's act of defiance would not go unnoticed by those who mattered most. The Game of Thrones was about to begin in earnest, and Isabella had just made her opening move. The morning of Queen Margaret's memorial service dawned gray and somber, with heavy clouds threatening rain over the kingdom of Astoria. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was equally charged, though for reasons far more complex than grief. Isabella stood before her mirror once again, but this time she was not alone. Her personal dresser, Sarah Chun, worked with practiced efficiency to arrange the intricate folds of Isabella's black mourning dress. The garment itself was a masterpiece of understated elegance, designed by the royal couturier to convey both respect for the deceased and authority befitting the future queen. But it was the tiara that commanded attention. The Astoria tiara sat atop Isabella's dark hair like a crown of stars, its diamonds catching every ray of light that filtered through the tall windows. Against the somber black of her dress, the jewels seemed to glow with an inner fire that was both beautiful and somehow ominous. "Your Royal Highness," Sarah said softly, "there's been some discussion among the staff this morning." Isabella met her eyes in the mirror. Sarah had been with her for 5 years, and her discretion was absolute. If she was mentioning staff gossip, it meant something significant was happening below stairs. "What kind of discussion?" "About the tiara, ma'am. Apparently, Queen Dowager Vivian made several phone calls very early this morning. The household is concerned about potential complications." Isabella's jaw tightened. She had expected resistance from Vivian, but she hadn't anticipated that the Queen Dowager would mobilize opposition so quickly or so comprehensively. A sharp knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Margaret Thornfield entered with an expression that Isabella had learned to recognize over the years, the carefully neutral mask that indicated serious trouble. "Your Royal Highness, the Lord Chamberlain requests an urgent audience." Isabella's stomach sank. Lord Chamberlain Reginald Hartwell was the most senior member of the royal household, responsible for the ceremonial aspects of royal life. If he was requesting an urgent meeting on the morning of a memorial service, it meant her decision to wear the tiara had created exactly the kind of crisis she had hoped to avoid. "Send him in," Isabella decided. There was no point in delaying the confrontation. Lord Hartwell entered with his usual formal bearing, but Isabella could see the tension in his shoulders. He was a man who had served the monarchy for over 30 years, navigating the complexities of royal protocol with diplomatic skill. His presence here meant that her choice had implications beyond simple family dynamics. "Your Royal Highness," he began, his voice carefully modulated. "I'm afraid we have a delicate situation that requires your immediate attention." "The tiara," Isabella said simply. "Indeed. I've received several communications this morning, including one from the Archbishop of Astoria, expressing concern about the appropriateness of your choice for today's service." Isabella felt her temper flare. The Archbishop had officiated at Queen Margaret's coronation and had maintained a close relationship with the royal family ever since. His involvement suggested that Vivian's campaign against her decision had reached the highest levels of both church and state. "On what grounds does His Grace question my choice?" Lord Hartwell looked uncomfortable. "He suggests that wearing Queen Margaret's most personal and significant piece of jewelry might be seen as presumptuous, given that your own coronation has not yet taken place. There's also concern that it might overshadow the memorial service itself." "And what do you think, Lord Hartwell?" Isabella asked directly. The question clearly caught him off guard. Palace protocol typically prevented such direct challenges to royal decisions. But Isabella was learning that her new position required her to push boundaries that had previously constrained her. "Your Royal Highness, my role is to advise on matters of protocol and tradition. From that perspective, I must note that Queen Margaret's jewelry collection has remained untouched since her death, following her specific instructions. Breaking that seal for the memorial service could be interpreted as precipitous. Isabella walked to the window, looking out at the palace grounds where preparations for the service were already underway. Television crews from around the world were setting up their equipment, and she could see the first guests beginning to arrive. In a few hours, the eyes of the world would be upon her, and every choice she made would be scrutinized and interpreted. "Lord Hartwell," she said without turning around, "in your 30 years of service, how many times have you seen the monarchy face genuine crisis?" The question was unexpected. "Several times, Your Highness. Your uncle's abdication, the death of Queen Margaret, your brother's recent decision to renounce his claim. And in each case, how did the family respond?" "With unity, ma'am. Public unity, regardless of private disagreements." Isabella turned to face him. "Then, surely you can see the irony in the current situation. Here we are, hours before a memorial service for a beloved queen, and instead of presenting a united front, the family is fracturing over a piece of jewelry." Lord Hartwell's expression remained carefully neutral, but Isabella could see she had struck a nerve. The royal household's entire existence was predicated on maintaining the dignity and stability of the monarchy. Internal conflicts that spilled into public view were the enemy of everything they worked to preserve. "What would you have me do?" Isabella asked. "Capitulate to pressure from those who question my judgment? Send a message to the world that I can be manipulated and controlled before I've even taken the throne?" Before Lord Hartwell could respond, another knock interrupted them. This time, it was Prince Philip, Isabella's cousin and third in line to the throne. Philip was known for his diplomatic skills and his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of family politics. His presence suggested that the crisis had reached even deeper into the royal family. "Isabella," he said, dispensing with formal address in a way that indicated the seriousness of the situation. "We need to talk." Lord Hartwell took this as his cue to exit, bowing formally before retreating from what was clearly about to become a family discussion. Philip waited until the door closed before continuing. "Vivian is furious," he said bluntly. "She's been on the phone with half the Privy Council this morning, suggesting that your decision shows poor judgment and raises questions about your readiness to rule." Isabella felt her world tilting. The Privy Council was the formal body that advised the monarch, but it also had the theoretical power to influence succession decisions in extreme circumstances. If Vivian was mobilizing council members against her, the implications were serious. "She's questioning my claim to the throne?" Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not directly, but she's planting seeds of doubt about your temperament, your respect for tradition, your ability to put the monarchy's needs above your personal desires." Isabella sank into a chair, the weight of the tiara suddenly, feeling crushing rather than empowering. She had intended her choice as a tribute to Queen Margaret, a way of honoring the woman who had shown her love and acceptance when others in the family remained distant. Instead, it was being twisted into evidence of her unfitness to rule. "Philip," she said slowly, "do you think I'm making a mistake?" Her cousin considered the question carefully. "I think you're in an impossible situation. If you back down now, you look weak and manipulable. If you proceed, you give ammunition to those who want to undermine you. Either way, you lose something valuable. So what do you recommend?" "I recommend you remember who you're trying to become. Are you going to be a queen who rules by consensus and committee? Or are you going to be someone who makes difficult decisions and stands by them, even when it costs you?" Isabella looked at her reflection in the nearby mirror. The woman staring back at her wore the face of a queen, but she still felt like the uncertain princess who had never expected to inherit the throne. The tiara caught the light, sending sparkles of brilliance across the walls, and for a moment she could almost hear Queen Margaret's voice. "She used to tell me," Isabella said softly, "that the crown doesn't make the queen. The queen makes the crown worthy of wearing." Philip nodded. Margaret understood something that many royals forget. The monarchy's power doesn't come from tradition or protocol or even law. It comes from the respect and trust of the people. Everything else is just window dressing. A new knock at the door interrupted them, this one more urgent than the others. Sarah entered, her face flushed with excitement. "Your Royal Highness, forgive the interruption, but there's been a development. The Prime Minister has arrived early and is requesting an immediate private audience." Isabella's heart began to race. Prime Minister Charlotte Blackwood was known for her pragmatic approach to politics, and her generally supportive relationship with the monarchy. If she was seeking an emergency meeting, it meant the Tiara controversy had reached the highest levels of government. How early? Philip asked. 2 hours, sir. She came directly from an emergency cabinet meeting. Isabella and Philip exchanged glances. Emergency cabinet meetings on the day of a royal memorial service were virtually unheard of. Something significant was happening beyond the palace walls. Send her to the green drawing room, Isabella decided. I'll meet with her immediately. As Sarah left to relay the message, Philip grabbed Isabella's arm gently. Whatever this is about, remember that you're not facing it alone. You have allies in this family, even if Vivian isn't one of them. Isabella nodded, drawing strength from his support. She adjusted the tiara slightly, ensuring it sat perfectly, then straightened her shoulders. Whatever crisis awaited her in the green drawing room, she would face it as the future queen of Astoria, not as the uncertain princess she had been just months ago. The walk to the green drawing room felt longer than usual, each step echoing through corridors that suddenly seemed filled with watching eyes. Palace staff moved about their duties, but Isabella could sense their attention, their awareness that something momentous was unfolding. Prime Minister Blackwood was waiting for her, standing by the window with her back turned. She was a woman in her mid-50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, known for her direct manner and political acumen. When she turned to face Isabella, her expression was grave. Your Royal Highness, she said, offering a formal curtsy. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Prime Minister, I assume this concerns the memorial service? In part, yes. But there are broader implications we need to discuss. Blackwood gestured to the seating area. May I speak frankly? Isabella nodded, settling into a chair while the Prime Minister took the one across from her. The situation this morning has created ripples beyond the palace walls. I've had calls from opposition leaders, from Commonwealth representatives, and from our ambassadors abroad. The international press has gotten wind of the family disagreement, and they're beginning to frame it as a constitutional crisis. Isabella felt her stomach drop. A constitutional crisis? Over a tiara? Over what that tiara represents, Blackwood corrected. Your decision to wear Queen Margaret's most personal jewel, against the wishes of senior family members, is being interpreted as either a bold assertion of your authority or a reckless disregard for royal protocol, depending on who's doing the interpreting. And which interpretation do you favor, Prime Minister? Blackwood smiled grimly. My job is to ensure the stability of the government and the monarchy. Personal interpretations are a luxury I can't afford. But I will tell you this. The opposition is already drafting questions for Parliament about royal succession procedures and the role of family consensus in major decisions. Isabella felt the walls closing in around her. What had begun as a simple tribute to her beloved great-aunt was rapidly escalating into a political crisis that could threaten the very foundations of the monarchy. What are my options? She asked. You can change your mind and or something else to the service. That would end the immediate crisis, but would also establish a precedent that family pressure can force you to reverse royal decisions. And the alternative? You proceed as planned, weather the storm, and hope that your eventual coronation gives you enough authority to overcome any damage done today. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the tiara and everything it represented. In a few hours, she would stand before the world as the future queen of Astoria. The choices she made in the next few minutes would define not just today's memorial service, but her entire reign. When she opened her eyes, her decision was cleared at St. Augustine Cathedral had never looked more magnificent or more forbidding. The ancient Gothic structure, with its soaring spires and intricate stone work, had hosted royal ceremonies for over 4 centuries. Today, it would witness what many would later call the defining moment of Princess Isabella's path to the throne. As Isabella's state car approached the cathedral, she could see the massive crowd that had gathered despite the gray morning. Thousands of people lined the streets, many holding flowers and photographs of Queen Margaret. The late queen had been genuinely beloved by her people, known for her warmth, her dedication to charitable causes, and her ability to modernize the monarchy while respecting its traditions. But it was the media presence that truly indicated the significance of this moment. Camera crews from every major network in the world had positioned themselves along the processional route, and Isabella could see the distinctive red lights of live broadcasts already underway. What should have been a solemn memorial service had transformed into a global spectacle, with every gesture and expression subject to immediate analysis and interpretation. "Your Royal Highness," said Detective Inspector Caroline Webb, the head of Isabella's security detail, "we've received updated intelligence about the crowd composition. There are several groups of protesters mixed in with the mourners." Isabella looked out at the sea of faces. "Protesters? What are they protesting?" "The usual Republican elements, ma'am, but also some groups specifically questioning the succession. Intelligence suggests that news of this morning's disagreement has already leaked to certain media outlets." Isabella's heart sank. She had hoped that whatever family drama had unfolded in private would remain private, at least until after the memorial service. The fact that protesters were already mobilizing suggested that the crisis had deeper roots than she had realized. "Any specific threats?" she asked. "Nothing credible, ma'am. But the atmosphere is more charged than we typically see for memorial services." As the car pulled up to the cathedral's main entrance, Isabella could see the receiving line of dignitaries waiting to greet her. Archbishop Michael Winters stood at the center, his ceremonial robes pristine despite the threatening weather. To his right, she could see various members of Parliament, foreign diplomats, and representatives from the Commonwealth nations. But it was the group of senior royals standing to the left of the Archbishop that drew her attention. Queen Dowager Vivian stood with perfect posture, her black mourning dress elegant and appropriate. Beside her, Prince Philip offered Isabella a subtle nod of support. But the tension was palpable, even from a distance. Isabella stepped from the car and immediately felt the weight of hundreds of cameras turning in her direction. The Astoria tiara caught the morning light, sending brilliant flashes across the cathedral steps. She heard the distinctive click and whir of camera shutters, a sound that seemed to grow louder with each step she took toward the entrance. As she approached the receiving line, Archbishop Winters stepped forward with a formal bow. "Your Royal Highness, on behalf of the Church and the people of Astoria, may I express our gratitude for your presence on this solemn occasion." "Thank you, Your Grace," Isabella replied, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Queen Margaret's memory deserves our highest honor, and I'm privileged to participate in this celebration of her extraordinary life." The Archbishop's eyes flickered briefly to the tiara, but his expression remained neutral. Whatever reservations he might have expressed privately, he was too experienced a diplomat to show them publicly. As Isabella moved down the receiving line, she was acutely aware of the scrutiny her choice was receiving. Foreign ambassadors, Commonwealth representatives, and government ministers all seemed to take special note of the tiara, their expressions ranging from admiration to concern. When she reached Queen Dowager Vivian, the tension became unmistakable. Vivian offered the required curtsy, but her eyes were cold as ice. "Isabella," she said quietly, her voice carrying just far enough for the nearby microphones to pick up, "I trust you've considered the implications of your choice today." "I've considered honoring Queen Margaret's memory in the most appropriate way possible," Isabella replied, matching Vivian's low tone while maintaining a slight smile for the cameras. The exchange lasted only seconds, but Isabella knew that every lip reader in the crowd would be analyzing their words within hours. The family divide was now public, broadcast to the world in real time. As they entered the cathedral, Isabella was struck by the overwhelming beauty of the interior. Every pew was filled with mourners, from heads of state to ordinary citizens who had won lottery tickets for the privilege of attending. The great organ filled the space with haunting music, and the stained glass windows cast rainbow patterns across the assembled congregation. But it was the positioning of the royal family that told the real story. Traditionally, the family would sit together in the front pew, presenting a united front during such occasions. Today, however, Vivian had arranged for a different configuration. She sat in the center of the front row, flanked by other senior royals, while Isabella found herself seated in the second row, slightly apart from the main family group. The message was clear and devastating. In the most public venue possible, Vivian was demonstrating that Isabella's position within the family hierarchy was uncertain, that her claim to leadership was contested. As the service began, Isabella tried to focus on the beautiful tributes to Queen Margaret. The Archbishop delivered a moving homily about Margaret's dedication to duty and her ability to adapt to changing times while maintaining the essential dignity of the monarchy. Musicians performed pieces that had been special to Margaret, and video tributes from world leaders played on large screens positioned throughout the cathedral. But Isabella found her attention constantly drawn to the reactions around her. She could see camera crews zooming in on her face, capturing every expression. Royal correspondents were undoubtedly providing running commentary about the family dynamics on display, and She knew that every gesture was being analyzed for political significance. During the reading of one of Queen Margaret's favorite biblical passages, Isabella noticed a commotion near the cathedral's main doors. Security personnel were moving discreetly through the crowd, and she could see Detective Inspector Webb speaking urgently into her radio. Something was happening outside. The disturbance became more pronounced during the musical interlude. Isabella could hear what sounded like shouting from beyond the cathedral walls, and several of the foreign dignitaries were glancing toward the doors with concern. As if on cue, Archbishop Winters adjusted the service program, moving more quickly through the remaining elements. Whatever was happening outside, the security services clearly wanted to conclude the ceremony as soon as possible. During the final hymn, as the congregation rose to sing, "Guide Me, O Thou Great Redeemer," Isabella felt a profound sense of isolation. She was surrounded by hundreds of people, many of them family members and close friends, yet she had never felt more alone. The tiara that was meant to connect her to Queen Margaret's legacy now felt like a target, marking her as different, controversial, embattled. As the service concluded and the congregation began to file out, Isabella noticed that the media attention had intensified. Camera operators were positioning themselves for the best shots of the royal family's exit, and she could see live television reporters preparing for immediate commentary. Queen Dowager Vivian approached her as they prepared to leave the cathedral. "I hope you're satisfied with today's performance," she said quietly, her words barely audible above the organ's recessional music. "I'm satisfied that I honored Queen Margaret's memory as she would have wanted," Isabella replied. "Margaret is dead, Isabella. Your responsibility now is to the living monarchy, not to the past." Before Isabella could respond, Vivian had moved away, positioning herself at the center of the royal group as they prepared to exit. Once again, the visual message was clear. Isabella might wear Queen Margaret's tiara, but Vivian still controlled the family dynamics. As they emerged from the cathedral, the scale of the disturbance outside became apparent. What had begun as a peaceful memorial gathering had transformed into something approaching a political demonstration. Groups of people held competing signs, some supporting Isabella's right to wear the tiara, others questioning her judgment and fitness to rule. "Long live Princess Isabella," shouted one group, their voices carrying across the cathedral grounds. "Respect royal tradition," countered another group, their banners displaying images of Queen Margaret alongside text questioning Isabella's choices. But it was the third group that truly captured Isabella's attention. A collection of younger protesters held signs reading, "Abolish the monarchy," and "Democracy, not dynasty." Their presence indicated that the morning's controversy had provided ammunition for Republican movements that sought to eliminate the royal system entirely. Detective Inspector Webb appeared at Isabella's side. "Your Royal Highness, we recommend proceeding directly to the car." The crowd dynamics are becoming unpredictable. As Isabella moved toward her waiting vehicle, she could hear reporters shouting questions. "Your Royal Highness, do you regret your choice of jewelry today? Princess Isabella, how do you respond to suggestions that you've divided the royal family? Your Highness, are you prepared for the political consequences of defying Queen Dowager Vivian?" Isabella maintained her composure, offering the slight smile and gracious wave that royal protocol demanded. But, inside, she was reeling from the realization that her simple tribute to Queen Margaret had triggered a crisis with implications far beyond anything she had imagined. As her car pulled away from the cathedral, Isabella could see the crowds growing larger rather than dispersing. The memorial service was over, but the real drama was just beginning. Television crews were conducting interviews with royal experts, opposition politicians were making statements about constitutional concerns, and social media was exploding with commentary about the morning's events. "Take me back to the palace," Isabella instructed her driver. "But use the private entrance. I need time to think before facing any more public scrutiny." During the drive through the palace gates, Isabella's phone buzzed with message after message. Her private secretary, her press secretary, various government officials, and family members all wanted immediate conversations about the morning's events and their implications. But it was the message from Prince Philip that gave her pause. "Emergency family meeting called for this afternoon. Vivian has something planned, and you need to be ready." Isabella closed her eyes and felt the weight of the tiara pressing down upon her head. What had begun as an act of remembrance was rapidly becoming a battle for the very survival of her claim to the throne. The stakes could not have been higher, and the next few hours would determine not just her future, but the future of the monarchy itself. As the car rounded the final corner toward the palace, Isabella made a decision that would define everything that followed. Instead of removing the tiara, instead of backing down or seeking compromise, she would double down on her choice. If wearing Queen Margaret's tiara was going to be interpreted as a declaration of independence, then she would make sure that declaration was heard clearly by everyone who mattered. The real fight was about to begin. The afternoon emergency meeting was scheduled for 4 o'clock in the Oak Conference Room, a space traditionally reserved for the most serious family discussions. As Isabella entered the room at precisely the appointed time, she found that nearly every senior member of the royal family had assembled, their faces uniformly grim. Queen Dowager Vivian sat at the head of the long mahogany table, her position making a clear statement about who she considered to be in charge of this gathering. To her right sat Prince Edward, Isabella's uncle and fourth in line to the throne. To her left, Princess Alexandra, Queen Margaret's daughter, and a woman known for her rigid adherence to protocol. Prince Philip had claimed a seat halfway down the table, clearly positioning himself as neutral ground between the competing factions. Other family members filled the remaining chairs, creating an atmosphere more reminiscent of a corporate board meeting than a family discussion. Isabella noticed immediately that Queen Margaret's portrait had been prominently displayed at the far end of the room, its placement ensuring that her late great-aunt would seem to preside over whatever decisions were made. The irony was not lost on her. Margaret's image watching over a meeting called specifically to address Isabella's choice to honor her memory. Isabella, Vivian began without preamble. I've asked everyone here because this morning's events have created a crisis that extends far beyond personal family dynamics. Isabella took her seat, noting that her assigned chair was positioned at the foot of the table, as far from Vivian as possible. Even in the seating arrangement, the power dynamics were being made clear. I'd like to hear exactly what kind of crisis you believe has been created, Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the intimidating atmosphere. Prince Edward leaned forward, his expression stern. The kind of crisis that threatens the very stability we've worked decades to build. Your decision to wear Margaret's tiara without consulting the family has been interpreted by the media as either reckless defiance or calculated political maneuvering. Both interpretations are damaging, Princess Alexandra added. If you're seen as reckless, it raises questions about your judgment. If you're seen as calculating, it suggests you're willing to divide the family for personal gain. Isabella felt her temper beginning to flare. And what about a third interpretation? That I chose to honor a beloved family member in a way that felt meaningful and appropriate. Intentions don't matter in our position, Vivian said sharply. Perceptions matter. Results matter. And the result of your choice today has been a media circus that makes the entire monarchy look dysfunctional. Prince Philip finally spoke up. With respect, Vivian, the media circus was created by the family's response to Isabella's choice, not by the choice itself. If we had presented a united front, there would have been no controversy. Vivian's eyes flashed with anger. Are you suggesting that we should have simply accepted such a significant breach of protocol without comment? I'm suggesting that turning a private family disagreement into a public display of division was far more damaging than anything Isabella did. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Isabella could see family members choosing sides, alliances forming and fracturing in real time. What struck her most was the realization that this conflict had been building for months, perhaps years, and her choice to wear the tiara had simply provided the spark that ignited long-simmering resentments. Let me share some facts, Vivian continued, opening a folder that had been sitting in front of her. In the 6 hours since this morning's service, I've received calls from 12 members of Parliament, 8 Commonwealth representatives, and 4 foreign ambassadors, all expressing concern about the stability of the succession. Isabella's blood ran cold. What kind of concern? The kind that questions whether you have the temperament and judgment necessary to rule effectively. Vivian's voice was clinical, almost detached. There are already discussions about whether additional safeguards might be needed during your transition to the throne. What kind of safeguards? Philip demanded. Princess Alexandra answered. The Privy Council is considering recommendations for extended oversight during Isabella's first year as queen. A council of regency that would need to approve major decisions until she demonstrates stability and competence. Isabella felt the room spinning around her. A council of regency was typically reserved for situations where a monarch was incapacitated or underage. The suggestion that one might be imposed on her represented a fundamental challenge to her authority before she had even taken the throne. That's unprecedented, she managed to say. So was wearing Margaret's most personal tiara without family consultation, Vivian replied coldly. Isabella stood abruptly, unable to remain seated while her future was being dissected. Let me understand this correctly. Because I chose to honor Queen Margaret by wearing a piece of jewelry that belonged to her, you're now suggesting that I'm unfit to rule without supervision. We're suggesting that your decision-making process appears to prioritize personal desires over institutional stability, Prince Edward said. That's precisely the kind of thinking that concerns constitutional experts. And what about the precedent you're setting? Isabella shot back. If the family can essentially overrule the legitimate heir because they disagree with her choices, what does that say about the strength of our constitutional system? The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone present. If Isabella could be marginalized and constrained before taking the throne, it would establish a precedent that could be used against any future monarch who challenged family consensus. Prince Philip stood as well, clearly choosing to align himself with Isabella. This is exactly the kind of thinking that weakened the monarchy during the constitutional crisis of 1936. When family politics becomes more important than constitutional law, everyone loses. The situation in 1936 involved a king who wanted to marry a divorced woman, Vivian replied. This involves a future queen who appears unable to distinguish between personal sentiment and royal duty. And who gets to make that distinction? Isabella demanded. You? The Privy Council? Parliament? Because last I checked, the constitutional monarchy we claim to defend places those decisions with the monarch, not with a committee of relatives and advisors. The argument was escalating beyond anything anyone had anticipated. Isabella could see some family members looking uncomfortable with the direction of the discussion, while others seemed energized by the conflict. Perhaps, said a new voice from the doorway, we should consider what Queen Margaret herself would have thought about this discussion. Everyone turned to see Sir Edmund Blackwood, the keeper of the crown jewels, standing in the entrance to the conference room. His presence was highly unusual. He was staff, not family, and had no formal role in royal family meetings. Sir Edmund, Vivian said icily, this is a private family discussion. Begging your pardon, Your Majesty, but it's a discussion about Queen Margaret's legacy and her personal effects. I have information that might be relevant. Isabella felt a glimmer of hope. Please, Sir Edmund, share whatever you think we should know. Sir Edmund entered the room with visible nervousness, clearly understanding that he was inserting himself into a conflict far above his usual station. Your Royal Highnesses, I was present when Queen Margaret gave her final instructions about her personal jewelry collection. We're aware of her instructions, Princess Alexandra said impatiently. She wanted the collection sealed until after the next coronation. That's partially correct, Your Highness. But there was more. Sir Edmund reached into his jacket and withdrew a sealed envelope. Queen Margaret left specific instructions that were to be opened only in the event of family disagreement about her collection. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the envelope, its implications suddenly clear. Queen Margaret, even in death, had anticipated this moment. Vivian's face had gone pale. What kind of instructions? I don't know, Your Majesty. The envelope was sealed in my presence, with instructions that it should only be opened by the senior member of the royal family in the event of a dispute about her legacy. Isabella looked around the room, studying the faces of her family members. Some looked curious, others appeared apprehensive, and a few seemed genuinely frightened by what Margaret's final words might reveal. Open it, Isabella said firmly. Isabella, Vivian warned. We don't know what that envelope contains. It could make this situation worse. How could it possibly be worse? Isabella replied. You're already questioning my fitness to rule. You're discussing regency councils and constitutional oversight. What could Margaret have written that would be more damaging than what you've already proposed? Prince Philip nodded his agreement. Open the envelope, Sir Edmund. With trembling hands, Sir Edmund broke the royal seal and unfolded the letter within. His eyes scanned the contents quickly, and Isabella watched as his expression transformed from nervousness to something approaching amazement. Sir Edmund, she prompted. Your Royal Highness, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Queen Margaret's instructions are quite specific. Read them aloud, Isabella commanded, using the tone of authority she was still learning to master. Sir Edmund cleared his throat and began to read. To my beloved family, if you are reading this letter, it means that my death has caused division rather than unity, exactly as I feared it might. I have spent my entire reign trying to modernize our monarchy while preserving its essential dignity, and I have watched too many royal families destroy themselves through petty squabbles and power struggles. Isabella felt her heart pounding as Sir Edmund continued. If Isabella has chosen to wear my tiara, it is because she understands something that some of you have forgotten. The monarchy's strength comes not from rigid adherence to protocol, but from the genuine connection between crown and people. Isabella possesses the courage and vision necessary to lead our institution into the future. The room was completely silent now, every eye fixed on Sir Edmund as he read Margaret's words. Therefore, I hereby designate Princess Isabella as the sole inheritor of my personal jewelry collection, to be used as she sees fit in service of the crown. Moreover, I explicitly state my support for her immediate assumption of full royal authority upon her coronation, without oversight, regency councils, or any other constraints that might be proposed by those who mistake caution for wisdom. Sir Edmund looked up from the letter, his face flushed with the magnitude of what he had just revealed. There's more, he said quietly. Queen Margaret also included specific instructions about the Astoria tiara. She writes, the Astoria tiara was created to symbolize the future of our monarchy. It should be worn by someone who understands that the crown serves the people, not the other way around. Isabella understands this truth, even if others do not. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella felt vindicated but also overwhelmed by the weight of Margaret's final blessing. Around the table, family members struggled to process the implications of what they had just heard. Queen Dowager Vivian was the first to speak, her voice barely controlled. Margaret is dead. Her opinions, however touching, cannot dictate royal policy in the present day. But they can certainly influence it, Prince Philip countered, especially when they demonstrate such clear support for Isabella's judgment and leadership. Isabella knew that this moment would define the rest of her path to the throne. Margaret's letter had given her ammunition in the family conflict, but it had also made the stakes even higher. If she failed to live up to Margaret's faith in her, the consequences would be devastating. Thank you, Sir Edmund, she said formally. Please ensure that Queen Margaret's letter is properly preserved and made available to the Privy Council and the Prime Minister. She turned to address the rest of the family, drawing upon every lesson in royal bearing she had ever learned. Queen Margaret's final wishes are clear. She believed in my ability to lead this monarchy into the future, and she explicitly supported my right to make decisions about royal traditions and protocols. I will not dishonor her memory by backing down from choices I believe are right, regardless of the political consequences. The battle lines were now clearly drawn. Margaret's letter had changed the dynamics of the conflict, but it had not resolved it. If anything, it had raised the stakes for everyone involved. As the family meeting dissolved into smaller conversations and heated exchanges, Isabella realized that wearing the tiara had been just the beginning. The real test of her fitness to rule was about to begin, and the outcome would determine not just her own future, but the future of the monarchy itself. The weeks following the memorial service would later be remembered as the most turbulent period in Astoria's constitutional history since the abdication crisis of 1936. What had begun as a family disagreement over a tiara had evolved into a full-scale examination of the monarchy's role in modern society. Isabella stood at the window of her private study, watching the protesters who had taken up seemingly permanent residence outside the palace gates. Their numbers had grown steadily since Queen Margaret's letter was leaked to the press, an occurrence that no one could adequately explain, though Isabella had her suspicions about the source. The leak had fundamentally changed the nature of the crisis. What had been portrayed as Isabella's reckless defiance was now reframed as her fulfillment of a beloved queen's final wishes. Public opinion, which had been divided, began shifting in her favor as people learned that Margaret herself had explicitly endorsed Isabella's choices. But the constitutional questions remained unresolved, and they had taken on a life of their own. "Your Royal Highness," said her private secretary, James Hartwell, son of the Lord Chamberlain and a rising star in royal administration, as he entered with the morning briefings. "The Prime Minister has requested an urgent meeting. Parliament is planning to debate the succession question this afternoon." Isabella turned from the window, unsurprised by the news. The opposition had been building momentum for weeks, using her conflict with Queen Dowager Vivian as evidence that the monarchy needed stronger constitutional constraints. What's the specific motion they're debating? A proposal to formalize the role of the Privy Council in overseeing major royal decisions during the first 2 years of any new reign. They're calling it the Royal Oversight Act. Isabella felt her stomach tighten. Such legislation would essentially place her under constitutional supervision, requiring council approval for decisions ranging from state visits to charitable patronages. It would make her a ceremonial figurehead rather than a genuine constitutional monarch. And the government's position? Prime Minister Blackwood is opposed, but her majority is thin. Several members of her own party are wavering, concerned about appearing to oppose modernization of the monarchy. Isabella had learned much about political maneuvering in recent weeks, watching as allies and opponents shifted positions based on public opinion polls and party calculations. The monarchy's future was being decided not in palace drawing rooms, but in parliamentary committees and television studios. Any word from the Commonwealth realms? James consulted his notes. Mixed reactions. The Canadian and Australian prime ministers have expressed support for maintaining traditional succession procedures. But the New Zealand government has suggested that this crisis demonstrates the need for Republican referendums throughout the Commonwealth. The implications were staggering. Isabella's decision to wear a tiara was potentially triggering the dissolution of the Commonwealth system that had bound together former British territories for decades. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Prince Philip entered, looking tired but determined. He had become Isabella's strongest ally within the family, though his support had come at considerable personal cost. Queen Dowager Vivian had essentially frozen him out of family functions, and several other relatives had made their disapproval of his position clear. "I've just come from a meeting with the Archbishop," he said without preamble. He wanted to discuss the coronation ceremony. Isabella's coronation was still months away, but the planning process had become increasingly complicated as the constitutional crisis deepened. Traditional elements of the ceremony were being questioned, and various groups were proposing modifications that would reflect the new oversight arrangements. What kind of discussion? He's under pressure to include language in the coronation oath about accepting parliamentary and council guidance. Nothing directly contradicting constitutional law, but phrasing that would set expectations about collaborative decision-making. Isabella felt her jaw tighten. Even the coronation ceremony, the most sacred moment in the transition of power, was being used as a battleground for the larger constitutional questions. And your response? I told him that any changes to the traditional coronation oath would require approval from the monarch designate, meaning you. But, Isabella, the pressure is intense. The church doesn't want to appear on the wrong side of public opinion about modernizing the monarchy. Isabella walked to her desk, where copies of Queen Margaret's letter lay among other important documents. She had read Margaret's words hundreds of times in recent weeks, drawing strength from her great aunt's confidence and support. But she also understood that Margaret's blessing carried enormous responsibility. "Philip," she said slowly, "do you think Margaret was right about me?" The question was more vulnerable than anything she had allowed herself to ask since the crisis began. Philip studied her carefully before responding. "I think Margaret saw something in you that you're still learning to see in yourself." She understood that the monarchy's survival depends on its ability to evolve while maintaining its essential character. You represent that evolution. But what if I'm wrong? What if my judgment really is flawed, and all of this conflict is just my stubborn pride refusing to accept legitimate criticism? Philip sat down across from her desk. "Isabella, in the past month, you've faced challenges that would have broken most people. You've been questioned, criticized, and undermined by your own family. You've watched your every decision be dissected by experts and politicians. And through it all, you've maintained your dignity, your principles, and your commitment to honoring Margaret's memory. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm right. No, but it means you have the character necessary to be queen. The specific decisions you make will sometimes be right, and sometimes be wrong. What matters is that you make them for the right reasons, and learn from the consequences." An urgent knock interrupted their conversation. James returned, his face flushed with excitement. "Your Royal Highness, there's been a development. Queen Dowager Vivian has just announced her intention to address Parliament this afternoon, during the debate on the Royal Oversight Act." Isabella felt her world tilt. Vivian addressing Parliament was unprecedented. Senior royals typically avoided direct involvement in legislative matters. Her decision to break that tradition indicated just how high the stakes had become. What's she planning to say? Her office hasn't released details, but sources suggest she intends to support stronger parliamentary oversight of royal decision-making. She may also address your fitness to rule without supervision. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the final battle approaching. For weeks, the conflict had been fought through surrogates, media statements, political allies, leaked documents. Now Vivian was preparing to make her case directly to the nation's elected representatives. "James," Isabella said, opening her eyes with new determination, "please contact the Speaker of the House. Inform him that I will also be addressing Parliament this afternoon." Both men stared at her in shock. "Your Royal Highness," James stammered. That's also unprecedented. The heir apparent doesn't address Parliament on matters of succession. Then, I'll be setting a new precedent. If Vivian wants to air our family's disagreements in front of the nation's legislators, then I'll ensure they hear both sides of the story." Philip looked concerned. "Isabella, this is an enormous risk. If your address goes poorly, it could end any chance of preventing the oversight legislation. And if I remain silent, it guarantees that Vivian's version of events will be the only one Parliament hears. I won't let her define my fitness to rule without giving me the chance to speak for myself." Over the following hours, Isabella's decision to address Parliament created a media frenzy unlike anything in recent royal history. Constitutional experts debated whether she had the authority to make such an address, while political commentators speculated about the unprecedented nature of the royal family's public conflict. By early afternoon, both houses of Parliament were packed with members eager to witness what many were calling the most significant constitutional moment in decades. The galleries were filled with journalists, diplomats, and members of the public who had won lottery tickets for the historic session. Queen Dowager Vivian spoke first, her address carefully crafted to appear statesmanlike rather than vindictive. She spoke about the importance of institutional stability, the need for careful transition during periods of change, and her concerns about preserving the monarchy's dignity in an increasingly complex world. "The events of recent weeks," she concluded, "have demonstrated that good intentions are not always sufficient to guide wise decision-making. The Royal Oversight Act would provide the support and guidance necessary to ensure that our monarchy continues to serve the nation effectively, regardless of the personal preferences or emotional attachments of any individual monarch." The applause that followed was polite but enthusiastic, and Isabella could see that Vivian's measured approach had been effective. She had managed to frame her concerns about Isabella's judgment as institutional rather than personal, making them seem more legitimate and less vindictive. When Isabella rose to address Parliament, the chamber fell completely silent. She wore a simple navy dress with minimal jewelry, a deliberate choice to avoid any suggestion that she was prioritizing style over substance. The Astoria tiara remained locked in the palace vault, its symbolic power too complex for this moment. "Honorable members," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the historic chamber, "I stand before you not as someone seeking to defend past decisions, but as someone committed to ensuring that our constitutional system remains strong enough to serve future generations." She had spent hours crafting her remarks, working with advisors to strike the right balance between humility and authority, between respect for tradition and commitment to necessary change. "The question before you today is not whether I made the right choice about a piece of jewelry. The question is whether our constitutional system is strong enough to allow the monarch to make difficult decisions, learn from their consequences, and grow into the role that history has assigned to them." Isabella could see members of Parliament leaning forward, engaged by her direct approach to the constitutional issues at stake. Queen Margaret's final letter, which has been made public, expressed her confidence in my judgment and her opposition to the kind of oversight mechanisms you are considering today. But I would argue that her opinion, however touching, should not determine your decision any more than Queen Dowager Vivian's concerns should determine mine. This was the crucial moment, the point where Isabella would either establish her authority or confirm her critics' concerns about her judgment. "What should determine your decision is this. Do you believe that our constitutional monarchy is strong enough to allow the monarch to exercise genuine leadership? Or do you believe that it requires the monarch to be a ceremonial figurehead, guided by committees and constrained by oversight?" The silence in the chamber was absolute. Isabella had reframed the entire debate, moving beyond personal conflicts to fundamental questions about the nature of constitutional monarchy in the modern world. "I cannot promise that I will make perfect decisions. No monarch in our history has achieved that standard. But I can promise that I will make my decisions based on genuine commitment to the welfare of our nation and our people, and that I will accept responsibility for the consequences." She paused, looking directly at the opposition benches where her strongest critics sat. "The Royal Oversight Act would not strengthen our monarchy. It would weaken it by suggesting that the Crown requires parliamentary supervision to function effectively. Such supervision would undermine the very separation of powers that makes our constitutional system stable. Isabella concluded with words that would be quoted in constitutional textbooks for generations. I ask you not to vote based on whether you approve of my recent choices, but based on whether you believe our democracy is strong enough to accept that the monarch, like the prime minister, like each of you, must sometimes make difficult decisions and stand by them. The applause that followed was thunderous, lasting nearly 5 minutes. When the vote was finally held, the Royal Oversight Act was defeated by a margin that surprised even Isabella's supporters. But, more importantly, something fundamental had changed in the relationship between Isabella and the nation she would soon rule. By addressing Parliament directly, by accepting responsibility for her choices while defending the principles behind them, she had demonstrated the kind of leadership that Queen Margaret had seen in her. In the months that followed, Isabella's coronation proceeded without the constitutional modifications that had been proposed. Queen Dowager Vivian attended the ceremony but maintained a dignified distance from Isabella, their relationship permanently altered by the events surrounding Queen Margaret's memorial service. The Astoria tiara was not worn at the coronation. Isabella chose instead to wear the traditional crown of state, understanding that some symbols were too powerful for transition moments. But the tiara remained in her personal collection, a reminder of the moment when she chose to honor the past while claiming her future. Years later, historians would mark Isabella's decision to wear Queen Margaret's tiara as the moment when the modern Asturian monarchy truly began, not because of the tiara itself, but because of Isabella's refusal to allow family pressure or political expedience to override her judgment about what was right. The crown, Isabella learned, did not make the queen. But sometimes, the queen had to fight to make herself worthy of the crown.